And so, I knew my life was going to change and I knew I wanted to be present for my daughter. So I started my own firm. And it's interesting because the story was, when I had my daughter, I thought that, I would just take on a few clients and play with Florence, my daughter, we just have a lot of fun together. And we immediately took off. Like we were getting government contracts, major government contracts. We were getting small business clients and we were really growing fast. But I was my strategy of entering the market was to really lowball my competitors, right? And what I found was that I was working and working and working, but I was having nothing to show for it. In fact, I was
Mm.
working harder for myself than I did in my corporate job. And a lot of your audience probably resonates with that feeling too of having been there. And it's interesting because, one Sunday night, my husband sat me down and, it's always scary whenever your husband says, honey, we
Yes.
need to talk, right? That's like the bad thing. Something's going on. And he's like, I think you'll be better off getting a job. That's what he told me.
Whoa.
And I remember my heart just plummeted because I had put all of my life. I mean, Florence and the business were like twins. It was like 3 years old at that point, and they were the twins. And it was heartbreaking because he was absolutely right. At my corporate job, I had benefits. I had retirement, right? Because they have 401k and they match you. And I had a really consistent, nice salary being a manager. And that was a hit home for me because suddenly it was like, get a job or change your business. Something's got to change. You cannot
Wow.
continue like this. And, really that year, I met Mike McAllowitz, I learned about Profit First, and it really revolutionized my business.
Awesome. Wow. Yes, those conversations are the ones like we need to talk. Oh goodness, what's going on? So I love though that your husband saw that and was able to, kind of help that with that reshifting and that refocusing. So what mistakes do you feel entrepreneurs make when it comes to managing their finances?
It's a lot of, there's a lot of things that come to my mind, but the biggest thing that I see is they never sit down before they start and they never define what does winning look like. You
Oh.
know, they live in this random world like, oh my gosh, a sale happened today. 5 sales happened today. We got this amount in the register. We can take our family out to dinner. But they never sit down and go, what does winning look like? Because you have to start with the end in order to re-engineer your pathway to get to that end. And so that's the biggest mistake that I see entrepreneurs make. And unfortunately, most of them don't realize that, right? Because 50% of small businesses are going to fail after 5 years, and then 70% are not going to be left standing after 10, right? So only 35% are left standing. And that's because they never engineer what's important, what's their why. And unfortunately, it has a cost because even if they do make it to the 10-year mark or 20-year mark, a lot of them aren't prepared to retire because they never put profit first.
Wow. Yeah. So wait and work all of that time to surpass the odds of the 5 years, the 10 years, and still wind up finding yourself in a situation that's definitely less than ideal. Thank you so much for that. So I would love to know, and you've seen a lot in 13 years, what is the biggest piece of advice that you have for entrepreneurs?
I have a lot of
I
advice, and it's going to
bet.
go back to what their intentions are, right? If your intention is to scale your business or to say small, right, you're going to have a different strategy from each other, right? Because if you want to scale your business, your approach is going to be very, very different from, if I just want to be a mom and pop restaurant. And again, there's nothing wrong with the approach. It's just that simply that, you know, if you're going to scale to international business or get into franchising, it's going to have a completely different approach to being a small business. So first of all, I would love to know the size of their company and what they're going to go after before I give any blanket type of advice. But really, just kind of going back to what we said, Kiva, really start with the end in mind. Start with your end game in mind. Re-engineer those steps and always take your profit first. I write in the book Profit First for Minority Business Enterprises. And I'm writing this book, it's a project that started, you know, a few years ago. I didn't start actually writing the book, but the itch started to come like this book needs to happen. The world isn't ready for this book. They need to have this book. And it started because, I was my family is originally from the East Coast, right? My mom grew up in like the Chester, Pennsylvania, Philadelphia area. And it's not necessarily the best area, when you compare areas. And I was visiting a family member and I parked on the side of her house And, the East Coast, they have different houses than what we have here in the South. They have the houses that are like they're more like townhomes. They're like right next to
Right.
each other, and there's like this alley in the back of them. And I remember parking like on the side of her house, and I looked over, and I'm like living in suburban Houston, and I see this light post, and it's decorated, and it's got like balloons, it's got flowers, it's got bears on it, and I'm like, it's a pretty out of place, pretty thing in the middle of this. And so
Right.
I literally go to my aunt and I was like, "Hey, what happened here? What's going on? Like, why is this right behind your house?" And she said, "You know what? We had a shooting. We had a gang shooting, and the little boy was killed because he was caught in the gang fire." And, you know, when you get to know me, things stay with me a little bit longer than what they stay with normal people because I can't
Mm.
just get out of the how do we, this just happened. Oh, so sad. My mind immediately goes to how do we fix this and how do we make a permanent fix? Because, like I said, I start with the end game in mind, right? And, and then, and it just kept spinning over and over again. The only way that we can eradicate this behavior and eradicate this really travesty that happens in these underprivileged communities is by taking our profit first, right? Because Kiva, you're an entrepreneur, I'm an entrepreneur. We create jobs. We
That's right.
create we have a bigger impact than feeding our families. We create jobs in our communities, right? We help people beyond ourselves. There have been people that have joined my firm that, applied for Big Four and they were just as good, but for some reason they didn't connect with the interviewer. They were the wrong color, they didn't laugh at the jokes, but they didn't connect. And what happens is, as when we hire from our communities and we train them and we give them an experience that they would never get, we don't just pivot our own legacies, right? We pivot those in our community. And that is
Absolutely.
how you eradicate the ghettos of America by creating job equality and redistributing the wealth. And that's how you do that by minority businesses. We need you to take your profit first. We need you as a country to take your profit first.